I was reborn. Reborn to the time before I married Luke Lewis. This time I decided to marry someone else, so Luke wouldn't miss his first love, Emily, because of me and end up watching her be married off to some old man in his 50s, wasting away in misery. In my previous life, my childhood friend Ben had loved me in secret for years. When he learned I had married another man, he stayed single all his life, and after I died, he even ended his own life at my grave. So now, fine, I would marry Ben, and Luke would marry Emily. Everyone would be happy. But why was it that when I didn't marry Luke, he only grew poorer and more miserable, not the least bit happy? Wasn't I supposed to be born with a fate that ruins her husband? Hadn't the Lewis family bragged that, with Luke's talent alone, plenty of girls were lining up to marry into their household, and that choosing me, Grace Bennett, was only because I seemed honest, dutiful, and fertile? They wanted me to marry in, bear children quickly for the Lewis family, and serve my in-laws and my husband well. Because that, they said, was a proper woman's duty. I snapped my eyes open. My parents stood by, smiling nervously, their faces carrying that familiar mix of flattery and embarrassment. My mother even tugged lightly at my sleeve, signaling me not to look so stiff. I lowered my gaze to the faded, washed white floral dress on my body. My fingertips were ice cold. It was this very day. These very words. In my past life, those lines about being a dutiful, fertile wife, together with Luke's seemingly gentle facade, had left me dizzy. I'd thought I was leaping into a cozy nest, never realizing it was a pit of fire. I ruined myself, and in the process fulfilled Luke and his flawless, untouchable Emily. A flash cut through my mind, Ben's lonely figure at my desolate grave, resolute to the point of death. My vision burned red. A sharp pain stabbed my chest, and a dense thorny ache spread like poison. And then there was Luke, holding Emily at my sick bed, sneering that I had occupied the Mrs. Lewis seat for too long, and stood in the way of his true love. His mocking face is one I can't forget. I was still dazed when a rush of hurried footsteps suddenly sounded outside the courtyard, mixed with heavy, ragged breathing. With a bang, the half-latched gate was slammed open, and every sound inside cut off at once. Luke staggered in, clutching the door frame, drenched in sweat as if he had sprinted all the way here. His hair was a mess, his suit wrinkled, none of the carefully maintained dignity he wore on ordinary days left. He lifted his head, his panicked eyes sweeping the room with a near-frenzied urgency before fixing hard on me. And look in them was shockingly complex. Panic, guilt, the wild joy of finding what was lost, and more than anything a reckless resolve. My heart gave a violent jolt. This scene hadn't happened in my last life. Mrs. Lewis froze, then forced a smile. Luke, why are you back now? Come on, we're discussing with your father and the Bennett family, a good date for you and Grace. No, Luke's roar cracked through the hall, making everyone jump. His chest heaved, his eyes were blood red as he stared straight at me. This wedding is off. I don't agree. Grace Bennett, I can't marry you. The hall went dead silent. My parents' faces blanched chalk white. Mrs. Lewis gaped like a hen with its neck pinched. I looked at him calmly, at the pain and struggle in his eyes that ran completely counter to what he was doing, at the way he seemed terrified that if he were even a second late, he wouldn't shake me off. Even like a lightning strike, an absurd yet crystal-clear thought split my mind. He had been reborn too. He knew that if he married me, he would miss Emily, and her father would marry her off to a merchant, leaving her to waste away in Diane's sorrow. He had come back to set things right, to kick aside me the mistake, before anything happened, and run to Emily instead. A cold, bitter laugh rolled up from my chest. The hate churned so fiercely, I could barely suppress it. On my face, though, I slowly let a faint, perfectly calm smile appear. Then under his shock and everyone's stare, I spoke softly. With every eye fixed on me, I raised my gaze to meet Luke's, his look a jumble of stardom, panic, and a hint of uncertainty, and my tone was as casual as if I were remarking on how nice the weather was today. I had wanted to say those very words myself, but out of respect for both families, I hadn't spoken first. I paused, and in that instant, I clearly saw Luke Lewis' pupils contract sharply. Actually, Ben and I have long had feelings for each other, I said calmly. We were only troubled over how to bring it up to Uncle and Aunt Lewis without upsetting anyone. Now that you've spoken first, Luke, that couldn't be better. The color drained from Luke's face as if he'd been struck hard across the head. He stared at me in disbelief, his eyes wide. You and Ben. No, that's impossible. That's not possible. You were supposed to love me with all your heart. In our last life, you thought of me until the day you died. How could you possibly be with Ben? His unfinished words, his almost broken tone, confirmed my suspicion completely. What do you mean? I tilted my head slightly, feigning confusion. My gaze was innocent yet distant. Luke, yes, we've known each other since childhood, but matters of the heart can't be forced. You have someone you love, and I also have someone I care for. If we each marry whom we choose, without interfering with one another, isn't that best for everyone? No, it's not like this. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Luke's eyes grew unfocused, his voice slipping into a dazed murmur as if lost in a great fog. Then he suddenly raised his head, desperately searching my face for any sign of falsehood. Grace, listen to me. You can't marry him. Luke, I interrupted, my voice still gentle, but carrying an unshakable finality. Congratulations on your freedom, and I also wish you and Emily a long and happy marriage. The name Emily was like a poisoned needle, piercing straight through his last line of defense. His whole body shook violently, and the way he looked at me was as though he'd seen a ghost. I no longer cared to look at his shattered, pitiful figure, turning instead to my parents, who were equally stunned, and to Mrs. Lewis, whose face had gone dark with suppressed fury. I curtsied lightly. Father, mother, since everything has been made clear, I'll return to my room. As for the details of breaking the engagement, you can discuss them with Aunt Lewis. I have no objections. I didn't bother responding to the way Luke's eyes burned into my back as if to pierce through me, nor to Mrs. Lewis's shrill, rising accusations. I walked steadily toward the back courtyard. The moment I turned, all the calm I had forced onto my face faded away, leaving only a barren desert of cold hatred in my eyes. Luke Lewis, you've come back to. Perfect. The show has only just begun. Do you know what it feels like to lose both wealth and so-called true love? This life, I'll make sure you and your Emily taste it to the fullest. Back in my small but tidy room, I shut the door, looking at the faint sounds of Mrs. Lewis's furious shouting and Luke's broken roars from the front hall. The world fell instantly quiet. I leaned against the cold wooden door, exhaling a long, trembling breath. This wasn't a dream. I had truly returned to the time before the tragedy began, before the endless days and nights of being used, drained, and suffocated. Memory surged like broken shards. The cold eyes by my sick bed, the bitter medicine forced down my throat in my final moments, the muffled gunshot before my lonely grave, and the spreading warmth of blood. Each fragment stabbed at my mind, tearing at my nerves, until nausea churned violently in my stomach. When I closed my eyes, I saw Ben's figure collapsing in front of my tombstone, painfully vivid. That fool, the boy who had silently followed me since childhood, who never once went against my word, who took every casual sentence I spoke as if it were a decree. How blind had I been in my last life to trust Luke's false tenderness so completely, while ignoring Ben's steadfast devotion through all those years. I had even ridiculed him with the cruelest words when he finally mustered the courage to ask me to leave with him. It felt as though a cold hand had clutched my heart tight, suffocating me with pain. Luckily, this time I still had the chance to make things right. Luke, go chase your flawless Emily all you like. Like the chaos in the front hall, the back courtyard was quiet. Only the rustling of wind through the old locust tree broke the stillness. I dragged over the familiar stepping stone, climbed onto it, and raised my head just high enough to peek over the wall. On the other side, in the Lewis family's back courtyard, Ben was crouched on the ground, carefully loosening the soil around his mother's treasured rose bushes. The afternoon sunlight filtered down through the branches and leaves. Dappled light spilled across Ben's straight back and focused profile, calm and steady. I picked up a small clod of dirt and tossed it lightly. Crack, it shattered at his feet. His hands paused and he looked up in confusion. When he saw my head poking over the wall, he froze for a moment, then immediately stood and walked quickly toward me, his brows knitting slightly with that familiar trace of worry. What's wrong? Was it something with the Lewis family? His voice was low, taut with a tension not easily noticed. He knew the Lewis family had come today to propose, and he had probably been listening next door the whole time, torturing himself with every sound but not daring to come ask outright. Seeing how cautious he looked, my heart ached and softened all at once. Ben, I cut him off, gripping the top of the wall with both hands and looking straight at him. Ben went to his eyes bright. Last time you said you wanted to take me away from here. Does that still count? Ben went rigid as if struck by lightning. His eyes flew wide open, and in his pupils I saw my reflection, clear and unmistakable, filled with shock, disbelief, and even a flash of panic. Grace, his Adam's apple bobbed. His voice came out hoarse and dry. Do you know what you're saying? Today was supposed to be your wedding to Luke. It's over. I cut him off cleanly, the corners of my lips lifting uncontrollably, like a child who had finally stolen a piece of candy. I kicked him to the curb. No, more accurately, he came running here to break the engagement first, so I just went along with it and rejected him in return. I blinked at him playfully, my tone light yet carrying a firmness I had never known before. So Ben, I belong to no one now. I'm still waiting for your answer to what you asked me last time. Should I give you a clear yes or no? It was as if the weight of this impossible turn of events crashed down on him all at once. Ben just stared at me, staring for what felt like an eternity. The shock and confusion in his eyes slowly transformed into a deep, overflowing joy and excitement, mixed with a fragile caution, as though afraid this might only be a dream. His hands clenched and relaxed at his sides, over and over, veins rising faintly on the backs of his hands. Last, he took a deep breath as if summoning all his strength and declared every word firm as stone. Yes, those calm, gentle eyes of his shone so brightly it was almost blinding. Grace Bennett, I've kept these words in my heart for so many years. As long as you want it, as long as I have it, it's yours. He paused, his voice sinking lower, carrying the weight of an oath that allowed no doubt. It counts, it will always count. The heavy stone in my chest finally crashed to the ground. Warmth surged through me, sweeping away every shadow and chill. Looking at him, I smiled, my eyes curved like crescent moons. Good then, Ben, come marry me, the sooner the better. At some point, the clamor in the front hall had already faded. I climbed down from the stone step, brushed the dirt from my hands and turned, only to come face to face with my mother. She stood under the eaves, looking at me with a complicated expression, hesitating to speak. Grace, she said at last, tell me the truth, is this with Ben real? Or are you only doing this to spite the Lewis family? Your mother has to know. I walked over and slipped my arm through hers, my tone more earnest than it had ever been. Mom, you've seen how Ben has treated me all these years, so as Dad, I was foolish before, blinded by Luke's shallow charm. But now I understand, when it comes to marriage and building a life, sincerity is what matters most. And Ben, he truly cares for me, values me. My mother looked into my clear, steady eyes, sighed, and finally said nothing more. She only patted the back of my hand gently. As long as you've thought it through, that's what matters. That boy Ben may be quiet, but he's solid and kind-hearted, far better than that Luke Lewis. Having all proper on the surface, yet acting so shameless, running here at the last minute to break off the marriage. What did they think of our daughter? Some plating. As my mother was fuming, my father walked in from outside, his face dark. He held a thick red envelope, stamped with golden lettering, and handed it straight to me. From the Lewis family, he said stiffly, anger still heavy in his voice. They claim it's an apology. If you ask me, it's just meant to humiliate us, show us how high their family stands, and how a Bennett girl could never measure up. I opened the envelope. Sure enough, it was an invitation to Luke Lewis and Emily's engagement banquet, the date set for the 8th of next month. So impatient. The card was designed with extreme luxury and precision, every detail extravagant. Their names were embossed in gold, side by side, pressed so closely together with a saccharine line of love poetry printed beneath. It was nauseating and deliberate. I could already imagine Luke's frantic joy. Desperate to set things right, urging Emily to fix the date as quickly as possible. And Emily, enjoying the thrill of being fought over, reveling in the feeling of grinding me into the dirt. Fast work, I sneered softly, my eyes cold as they skimmed over their two names. Looks like true love really is unstoppable. My mother leaned in, took one glance and spat on the ground. What nonsense. Just now they were here, all respectful. Now they're shouting to the world that he'll marry someone else. Whose face are they trying to slap? Grace, throw that thing away. We don't need to look at it. Throw it away. Why bother? I tossed the invitation casually onto the stone table beside me, my voice light as though it had nothing to do with me. They went out of their way to send us their happy news. We ought to give some kind of response, don't you think? I looked at my parents, a smile curving my lips though my eyes were icy. Father, mother, let's start preparing. Preparing what? My father blanked, confused, preparing 2 gifts. I smiled sweetly, but there was no warmth in my gaze. One for Mr. Luke Lewis and Miss Emily, to congratulate the happy couple, and the other. I paused deliberately, my tone crisp and steady, for ourselves. Even and I will hold our engagement banquet on the very same day. As for the place, I think the Everbright restaurant at the east end of town will do nicely. It may not be as grand as the Red Pavilion hotel the Lewises booked, but the food is good and the price fair. My parents were stunned. Their mouths hung open, unable to close. The same day, right across from them, my mother stammered, "Grace, isn't that a little too much?" I arched a brow. Why? They can do it, but we can't. Is a good day reserved only for Luke Lewis and Emily, and not for me and Ben? That's not what I mean. My mother said quickly, worry written across her face. I'm afraid it'll look ugly, that people will talk, that you'll be wronged. I slipped my arm through hers, my voice cheerful but unwavering. Don't worry, Mom. In this life, anyone who dares wrong me, I'll make sure they don't get to enjoy themselves either. Happiness is something we make for ourselves, not something to be compared. If Luke Lewis wants to flaunt himself, let him. But I, Grace Bennett, am marrying Ben, and our engagement banquet won't just be earlier than theirs. It'll be livelier, noisier, and far more joyful. That honor the Bennetts must win back in full. My father opened his mouth to speak, but only let out a long sigh. His rough, callous hands rubbed his face as he muttered, "Fine, my daughter's right. The Lewises chose to be ruthless. Don't blame us for answering in kind. The same day it is, I'll go speak to old Mr. Phelps right away." My mother still hesitated, but when her eyes met mine, so calm and resolute, she swallowed her protests. She only muttered faintly, "What kind of situation is this?" So the matter was decided. The Everbright restaurant might not match the Lewises' fancy Red Pavilion hotel, but when the owner heard we were going head-to-head with the Lewises, he pounded his chest with assurance. He promised to make the event as lively as possible, and even gave us a generous discount. From then on, everything moved like a whirlwind. The betrothal gifts, the exchanging of names, the blessings, all the traditional steps were completed in a rapid, unspoken accord. The Phelps family was overjoyed. We had poured nearly everything we had into the preparations. Ben was so busy he barely had time to sit. Work shadows under his eyes that couldn't hide the light shining within them. Whenever he looked at me, there was always that cautious, disbelieving tenderness, as though I were fragile glass or some priceless treasure that had fallen from the heavens straight into his arms. Meanwhile, the Lewis family stayed completely silent. No doubt Luke was still reveling in the wild joy of finally securing his so-called true love, Emily, and had no time for anything else. So be it. The wind slipped quickly, and soon the 8th day of the month arrived. The Everbright restaurant was strung with lanterns and bright red decorations. It couldn't compare to the dazzling splendor of the Red Pavilion Hotel, but it was still festive and lively, filled with the bustle of neighbors and friends. Across the street, the Red Pavilion loomed, grand and extravagant, its entrance lined with elegantly dressed guests in suits, gowns, and cheapos. A massive sign stood outside, reading in bold golden characters, "Mr. Luke Lewis and Miss Emily, engagement celebration." I wore the crimson cheapal Ben's family had given me. The fabric wasn't the finest, but the tailoring was perfect, flattering my figure. Ben in his deep blue jonction suit stood straight and tall beside me, his palms slick with sweat as he held my hand tight. "Don't be nervous," I whispered with a small laugh. "Today is our happy day." He nodded firmly, his ear scarlet, though his eyes burned bright. "Yes, our happy day." Both banquets began almost simultaneously. At the Everbright, the hall was crowded with familiar faces, neighbors, relatives, honest people of the town. The atmosphere was warm, lively, down to earth. Ben, though quiet, was pulled into drinking by the cheerful teasing of the guests. His cheeks flushed crimson, and he could only grin at me foolishly. Kids were emptied, cups refilled, laughter filled the air, and firecrackers cracked outside in waves. Just then, a commotion stirred at the entrance. The lively chatter quieted, all eyes turning toward the doorway. Luke Lewis stood there in an expensive white suit, hair slicked with oil. On the surface, he looked every bit the proper gentleman, yet his expression was strained, as though he were suppressing deep irritation. His gaze kept darting toward our side of the street. Looking to his arm was Emily. Today, she was meticulously dressed in the latest fashion. A lace-trimmed dress, pearls around her neck, her hair curled in stylish waves, her makeup perfect. She tilted her chin, a proud peacock on display, though her eyes betrayed the calculation and comparison she couldn't quite hide. Behind them trailed several relatives from the Lewis and Miller families, their faces full of smug anticipation, as if they had come only to watch a spectacle. Well, if it isn't little Grace, Emily was the first to speak, her voice syrupy sweet yet edged with mockery. Today is your big day, too, I see. But why did you choose such a place? Isn't it a little beneath you? Her eyes swept over the modest hall, the plain tables and bowls, lips curling and open to stain, as though she had stepped into a slum. Luke's brows pinched tighter. His eyes lingered for a heartbeat on my crimson chipbow, and the way Ben's hand clasped mine. His expression was muddled, irritation, contempt, and perhaps fleetingly, something like regret. He cleared his throat, speaking with a tone of condescending superiority. Grace, Ben, congratulations. I didn't expect you to move so quickly. Emily and I came to offer a toast, since we've known each other so long. Ben instinctively stepped forward, half shielding me with his body, his face darkened. Thank you, we appreciate the thought. I squeezed his palm lightly, telling him without words to stay calm. Then I picked up 2 cups of wine from the table and walked forward, my expression wearing just the right polite smile, distant yet cordial. Mr. Lewis, Miss Emily, congratulations to you as well. I handed 1 cup to Ben, raised the other myself, and looked at the pair steadily. We're truly honored that, out of all the splendor of your red pavilion banquet across the street, you still took the time to come give face to our humble little gathering. You've shown us such generosity. My tone was gentle, even smiling, but my words pointedly elaborate carried their own weight. Those words, a humble little family, slipped in like soft nails, pricking just enough to sting. Emily's smile froze for a moment, and Luke's expression grew more strained. He seemed to be searching my face for some trace of forced cheer or hidden resentment, but he found nothing. I tilted back my head and drained my cup in 1 clean swallow, then gave the empty glass a little shake, smiling brightly at them, then caught on at once, tipping his own cup back without hesitation. A flash of irritation flickered in Luke's eyes, but before it could show too clearly, Emily forced a laugh and nudged his arm. Luke, look how straightforward Grace is. We should drink too, shouldn't we? Don't waste her kindness. Luke looked as though he had been pushed on a burning coals. He reluctantly accepted a glass from a waiter, his eyes still fixed on me, with an unreadable mix of confusion and unrest. Emily's smile began to slip, her voice sharpening as she urged him. Drink, Luke. What are you waiting for? Don't tell me you can't bear to swallow the wine from Grace's table. The jealousy and spite in her words were thinly veiled, and the room fell silent, all eyes flicking between us, the air turning tense and awkward. Pressed by Emily's goading, Luke finally tipped his head back and downed the wine in 1 rough gulp. His movements were clumsy, splashing liquor onto the front of his expensive suit. When he finished, his tone was curt and brimming with unplaced anger. Only then did Emily hum with satisfaction. She curved her lips into a brittle smile, turning to me again. Well then, Grace, enjoy yourselves. We still have many distinguished guests waiting for us across the street, and you know the Red Pavilion isn't cheap. We can't neglect our company, can we? She deliberately emphasized distinguished and isn't cheap, then looped her arm through Luke's and made to leave. Miss Emily, wait. My voice stopped her in her tracks. She turned back, suspicious and guarded, eyes narrowing. I kept my smile unchanged, picked up 2 bright red envelopes I had long prepared, and handed them out. Today's your engagement, a joyous occasion. This is just a small token from us, a congratulatory gift. My tone was utterly sincere, warm enough to sound genuine. May the 2 of you share deep affection, grow old together, and never be parted. For a moment, my true thoughts nearly slipped out, but I caught myself in time. The envelopes bulged thickly, heavy in the hand. Emily's eyes lit up, her fake smile finally gaining a trace of real satisfaction. She reached out immediately, feigning politeness. Oh, how thoughtful of you, but really, Grace, we couldn't possibly, especially when things aren't easy for your family. Yet even as she spoke, her fingers pinched the envelopes to test the weight. Her smile froze in an instant. The texture was all wrong, not the smooth crispness of bills, but the rough bulk of stacked paper. She lost control of her composure, tearing 1 envelope open on the spot. With a loud rustle, the contents spilled onto the floor, not money, but a neat bundle of old, yellowed newspapers, cut square and even. The top page bore 4 bold ink characters scrawled across it. Scumbag and slut, a match made in heaven. Emily's face contorted with rage, twisting into something ugly. Her hands shook, scattering the papers across the ground. She jabbed a sharp, painted fingernail toward my face, shrieking, "Grace Bennett, what do you mean by this?" Luke's face darkened instantly, veins bulging at his temple. "Grace Bennett, you've gone too far." I blinked innocently, stepping back to hide behind Ben. My voice soft, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Oh, Miss Emily, you don't like it." But didn't Mr. Hewer Lewis once say what he admired most about you was the literary air you had when you read the paper, that the fragrance of ink on the pages made you seem more refined than anyone else. I went out of my way to find clean newspapers just to match your tastes. A stifled snicker broke the silence, then another, until muffled laughter rippled through the hall. "Haha, newspapers as a wedding gift. How fitting." "Exactly, ink fragrance so refined. Clever girl Grace, what a gift." Emily's face flushed red, then pale, her chest heaving furiously as the mocking laughter grew around her. The careful makeup on Emily's face couldn't hide her twisted expression. In her whole life, she had never suffered such humiliation. Luke shook with fury beside her, his hand trembling as he pointed at me. You're utterly unreasonable." "Emily, let's go, we won't stoop to their level." He dragged the nearly hysterical Emily away, stumbling out amid a chorus of muffled laughter and whispered mockery. They looked like 2 drowned dogs with their tails stepped on, fleeing in disgrace. I watched their retreating backs, clapped the non-existent dust off my hands, and calmly returned to my seat. Ben looked at me, his eyes full of astonishment that soon softened into overwhelming fondness and laughter. Leaning close, he whispered by my ear, "You're mischievous." I lifted a teacup, took a sip, and winked at him playfully. "That was nothing. The real show is yet to come." After our engagement, time seemed to fast forward. Our wedding was simple, but warm, unlike the Lewis family's flashy displays. We had only the heartfelt blessings of close relatives and friends. The old locust tree in the Phelps courtyard was in bloom, its fragrance drifting far and wide. Ben treated me with the kind of goodness that was clumsy but sincere. He didn't speak much, but he remembered everything I liked. When I said I wanted to try running a small business, he didn't hesitate. He handed me all his savings and went around borrowing from every relative and friend he could. He managed to lease a tiny shop at the town's entrance. Placing the deed and keys into my hands, he said firmly, "You can do whatever you want. Even if we lose money, it doesn't matter. You have me." The heavy weight of the keys pressed into my palm, and my nose stung. In my past life, I had racked my brain for the Lewis family's business, but all the credit had gone to Luke, while I never even earned a kind word. Yet this life, after just one casual remark, Ben had wagered his entire fortune to support me. I couldn't repeat my past mistake of bearing myself an endless toil without recognition. Together, Ben and I scrubbed the shop clean until it was bright and welcoming. Drawing on the scraps of knowledge I had accumulated in my previous life, I started selling sundries from north and south alongside some homemade snacks I had invented. My prices were fair, my smile sweet, and my products reliable. Ben handled the heavy lifting, always working tirelessly without complaint. We woke early and worked late. Lives so busy our feet barely touched the ground. And strangely enough, luck seemed to follow us. Dried goods I'd worried wouldn't sell were bought out in bulk by passing merchants as soon as they hit the shelves. The candied meats and bean curd I experimented with always tasted better than others, bringing in more and more returning customers. Even when Ben went out of town for supplies, he would somehow stumble across bargain stock or meet kind benefactors, appointed him away from dead-end deals. Business at our little shop grew so quickly that within half a year we had repaid all our debts and even expanded by purchasing the adjoining storefront, knocking down the wall to make a wide, spacious store. Neighbors and townsfolk all said the Phelps boy had found a treasure in marrying me, that his fortunes were clearly rising. Ben would just grin foolishly whenever he heard this, pride shining in his eyes he couldn't hide. As for Luke, word spread that his marriage to Emily was nothing like the dream he had imagined. Emily, spoiled as a rich young lady, spent recklessly despite her generous dowry. She demanded the latest fashions, foreign cosmetics, hired rickshaws at every outing, and constantly hosted tea parties and salons at home to flaunt her status as Mrs. Lewis. Luke, reborn and convinced that casting me aside would guarantee smooth sailing toward the pinnacle of life with his true love, forgot one thing. In our past life, most of the ideas that built his wealth and the key decisions that saved him had come from me, fretting endlessly behind the scenes. Now all he had was an empty shell, chasing easy dreams of success. Emily wasn't the type to endure hardship, much less manage or strategize for him. Together they were simply burning through what they had, their conflicts rising steadily to the surface. From time to time, when I passed Emily at the market, she still dressed herself up, bright and polished as ever. But the sharpness and jealousy in her eyes only grew heavier. When Emily saw the steady stream of customers at my shop, she would deliberately raise her voice, criticizing my goods as cheap and unpresentable, while at the same time complaining that the Red Pavilion's food was worse than before. Yet the laughter of her companions grew more and more forced each time. Another half-year passed. We had managed to save a fair sum. I knew dabbling in small business couldn't last forever, so I recalled the trends that had become popular in my previous life. I discussed my ideas with Ben, plans that must have sounded far-fetched. He listened in silence, never once doubting me, and only asked, "What do you need me to do?" With those words, I dared to move forward, securing land, handling permits, ordering equipment. Each step was tedious and overwhelming. Yet strangely, whenever we seemed cornered, a way forward would appear. Sometimes it was a customer I had helped before, who happened to have connections and lend a hand. Other times, policies shifted unexpectedly in our favor. The most incredible stroke of luck came when the owner of an old factory we had our eye on grew desperate to sell. We bought it for a shockingly low price, and our little food factory truly came to life. The snacks we produced had unique flavors, packaged cleanly and strikingly. Before long, they were being sold across several nearby counties. One handled production management and outside sales, while I kept the accounts and worked on developing new products. Life was exhausting, but watching the factory gradually run smoothly filled me with a sense of steadiness and joy I had never known in my past life. Wealth grew faster than we had ever imagined. Soon we bought a spacious house in the city and brought both our parents to live with us. The first real piece of jewelry then bought me wasn't gold or jade, but a heavy Parker fountain pen for my bookkeeping. "For your accounts," he said, his eyes bright. I knew it was his way of telling me he remembered every bit of my effort and he valued me. Meanwhile, the Lewis family declined with shocking speed. Luke's ambition soared too high for his skills. Every investment he made failed, yet he stubbornly refused to accept reality, chasing dreams of overnight success. One by one, he squandered the family's remaining resources. Emily couldn't endure hardship. Her tantrums and fights never ceased. Whatever elegance she once had was ground down by endless quarrels, bills, and bitterness. I heard they even sold their house near the Red Pavilion and moved into a dirty, cramped alley in the south of the city. The former white moonlight had become nothing more than a nagging, penny-pinching wife, complaining daily about her husband's incompetence. The contrast couldn't have been starker. The next time I heard news of Luke was on a late autumn evening. We had just sent off the last delivery truck from the factory. The workers had gone home and Ben was in the office checking the final batch of orders. I poured him a cup of hot tea. Just then a noisy commotion rose outside, mixed with the urgent voice of old Chen, our gatekeeper. "Let me in. I must see Grace Bennett. I have to see her." "Grace. Grace." It was Luke's voice, hoarse and frantic, stripped of the cultivated gentleness he once wore like armor. Ben's brows knit instantly. He stood at once, placing himself protectively in front of me. I patted his arm and walked to the window. At the factory gates, Luke was pushing madly to get in. His suit wrinkled, hair disheveled, eyes sunken. Old Chen held him back firmly. He looked utterly pitiful, like a stray dog. "Grace, I know you're in there. Come out." "I was wrong. I was so wrong," he shouted until his throat was raw, his eyes bloodshot. "In our past life, I was a bastard. I treated you horribly. I shouldn't have done that to you. Please forgive me. Just give me one more chance, won't you?" So he really believed I had never known. I pushed open the office door and stepped outside. Ben stayed close at my side, his eyes wary on the half-crazed man at the gate. When Luke saw me, his eyes lit up. Desperate, as if he had seized a lifeline. He struggled harder against old Chen's grip, trying to break free. "Grace, Grace, you're finally willing to see me." Luke's voice cracked as he struggled madly against old Chen's grip. "Listen to me. It was Emily, that wretched woman. She deceived me. She never loved me. All she cared about was my money. Now that I'm broke, she's run back to her old lover. She even wants to divorce me." He wept, words spilling in a tangled mess, as he tried to throw old Chen off and lunge toward me. "Grace, I regret it. I regret it so much. You were the only one who treated me well. My success in our past life was all because of you. I know that now I know everything. Please let's start over. I swear this time I'll be good to only you. We'll live like before. No, even richer than before. Grace, help me. Just help me one more time." I stood a few steps away, watching coldly as he performed his pitiful act. "Mr. Lewis," I said evenly. My voice calmed without a ripple. "You've had too much to drink." Luke froze, clearly not expecting that answer. He shook his head frantically. "No, I'm not drunk. I'm completely sober. Grace, I know you came back too. You must remember our past life. Otherwise, you wouldn't have married Ben. You wouldn't be living this well. Help me. Only you can help me." So at last he admitted it. He had finally torn off his last shred of pretense. I looked at him and suddenly felt it was absurd. "Mr. Lewis, I don't understand what you're talking about," I replied lightly, with just the right trace of puzzled innocence. "Past life, this life. Whatever is between you and your wife is your family matter. Nothing to do with me. As for how I live, you needn't trouble yourself." I let out a quiet laugh and slipped my arm through Ben's. Because standing beside him, I am Mrs. Phelps now. My husband is Ben Phelps. I will only ever help him. Isn't that right, Ben? Ben wrapped his arm around my shoulders, his gaze on Luke cold and oppressive. "Mr. Lewis, mind yourself. Don't harass my wife." "No, it's not like that." Luke had completely lost control. He pointed at Ben, shouting wildly, "What are you so proud of, Ben? You only picked up what I threw away. Grace Bennett was my wife in our past life. She loved me. She loved me until the day she died." His words cut off abruptly. Ben's fist clenched so tightly the knuckles cracked, his face dark as thunder. He stepped forward, his presence so menacing that Luke choked on the rest of his rant. "Luke," Ben said, his voice low and sharp as breaking ice. "In our past life, the grass on my wife's grave was 3 feet high, and it was you who buried her there." The words struck Luke like lightning. He went rigid, the madness and desperation on his face shattering into sheer terror and disbelief. His eyes darted from me to Ben, lips trembling, but no sound came out. Only then did he realize. I had always known. I had watched him all along. His smudness after rebirth, his eagerness to cast me aside, his so-called true love spiraling with him into ruin. I had seen him take a winning hand and grind it into dust, step by step until he crashed into the dirt. All I did was watch from afar, and when he stumbled toward the abyss, I gave the gentlest of pushes. True revenge isn't killing a man, but making him watch the person he abandoned shine brilliantly in the wealth and happiness he cared for most, while he himself wallows in regret and poverty, trapped with no way out. Luke seemed to lose every bone in his body. He collapsed like a rag doll, hanging limply as old Chen held him up with visible disgust in his eyes. Luke's hollow voice kept repeating the same words over and over. You knew, so you always knew." I didn't spare him another glance. With my hand in Ben's, I turned and walked away. Behind me, only the hopeless cries of a trapped beast remained, carried off by the bleak autumn wind and scattered into the twilight. "It's cold. Let's go home," Ben said, gripping my hand tightly. His palm was warm and steady. I leaned against him, my heart calmed and filled with warmth. The setting sun stretched our shadows long, weaving them together until they could never be separated again. In this life, we were destined for one another. Time was quiet. Days were good. As for the people and things that no longer mattered, they were nothing but dust long since ground beneath our feet. After Luke's crazed scene at the factory gates, he vanished completely from public sight. Some said he'd lost his mind, wandering endlessly near the foul canals of the city's south side, muttering my name and babbling about regrets from a past life. Others claimed Emily had taken whatever valuables remained, run off with her old lover, a man said to have money but a violent temper, and that before leaving she had beaten and cursed Luke brutally. Either way, the pair who had once flaunted their so-called true love rotted away faster and more disgracefully than anyone had imagined. Time slipped by again, another half year. Our food factory doubled in size, becoming one of the largest taxpayers in the region. When the county magistrate treated us with respect, life was prosperous and steady. Ben treated me as tenderly as when we first met, perhaps even better. Between us, there was a tacit understanding never to mention those two again, as if they were nothing more than rancid refuse tossed into the garbage heap of history. Until one sweltering summer night, a frantic pounding on the gates shattered the household's peace. Old Chen, the steward, threw on his coat and went to answer. Side stood the headman from the southern district, pale with panic. "Mr. Phelps, Mrs. Phelps, my apologies, forgive the intrusion, but there's been a terrible incident." He wiped the sweat from his brow, his voice trembling. "It's Luke Lewis and his wife Emily Miller. They are dead. Both of them. Found in an abandoned cesspit in the south of the city." My heart jolted. Ben's brows furrowed tightly. "How did they die?" he asked, his voice carrying a trace of disgust he didn't bother to hide. "Ah, don't even mention it. Wicked, truly wicked." The headman slapped his thigh, his face twisted with both fear and revulsion. "That cesspit hasn't been used in years. No one ever goes near it. This afternoon, a boy's ball fell in, and when he climbed down to fetch it, he found legs. 2 human legs. Nearly scared him to death. But the troll officers were called. It took tremendous effort to haul the bodies out. They were already unrecognizable, bloated and decayed. If not for a stack of Luke's IOUs and a broken bracelet of Emily's found in a nearby shack, they wouldn't have been identified at all. The officers guessed the 2 of them had another violent quarrel in the night, and somehow both fell in. The pit's mouth is narrow, the inside slick and deep, the stench unbearable. There was no way to climb out. They drowned alive in that filth. By now, the corpses can't even be looked at. The stench carries for streets around. The patrol said their manner of death was too foul. They'll be sent straight to the pauper's graveyard outside the city to be buried. He stopped, his words trailing, but the meaning was clear. Luke had no family left in this world. The only people he had once clung to desperately, even in madness, were us. And so, absurdly, we were the ones expected to deal with the mess. A wave of nausea surged up my throat, drowned in a cesspit, soaked until the flesh sloughed away, reeking beyond description. A death grotesque and fitting beyond words. I could almost picture it. Endless darkness, foul sludge forcing its way into nose, mouth, ears, the panic of suffocation, the struggle, the despair, until breath finally ceased. Even in death, the body swelling, rotting, merging completely with the filth. Ben's face was ashen. He squeezed my hand hard, his voice cold as he spoke to the headman. "We have nothing to do with Luke Lewis anymore. His remains. Handle it as an unclaimed body," Ben said coldly. Yes, of course," the headman stammered with relief, nodding rapidly. "We'll take care of it right away, right away." "What bad luck. Forgive me for disturbing you, Mr. and Mrs. Phelps." "No, sorry, so sorry." He all but fled, as though pardoned from a heavy sentence. The gates closed behind him, shutting out not only the faint stench that seemed to linger in the air, but also the last thread tying us to Luke Lewis and Emily Miller. Ben turned, pulling me tightly into his arms. His large hand stroked gently across my back as he whispered, "It's over, Grace. It's all over now." I buried my face against his warm chest, inhaling deeply. The familiar scent of soap wrapped around me, steady and safe, washing away the sickening images crowding my mind. Yes, it was over. Ended in a way far more brutal, filthy and degrading than anything I could have imagined as revenge. The dignity, the glory, the so-called love they had pursued all their lives had finally been buried in the foulest, ugliest, most disgraceful place possible, with the cruelest irony. If there was ever a phrase to die without a good end, this was it. A death in disgrace, stinking for eternity, with no one to claim their corpses, cast into a pauper's grave, left for wild dogs to gnaw until nothing remained. Truly a death without a whole body, a scattering into dust. Perhaps even heaven itself had found them unbearable, and so had reached down to grant that scum of a man and that wretched woman the ending they deserved. I lifted my head, meeting Ben's worried gaze. Slowly I shook my head and gave him a smile, one of true release. It's over, Ben. Tomorrow I want to eat your noodles, the simple kind with 2 fried eggs.